Do you have a view on the way government handles these large capital projects? Do you think the bureaucracy can get in the way of it?
Yes.
Do you think?
I think, you know, with regard to what we were doing, we couldn't possibly have had involvement from Treasury. It wouldn't have worked. We would never have recovered from Enron. We would never. They use different style contracting, although I told them repeatedly they shouldn't be using the style contract that they had. There was a big fuss as to how could the MEA recover from Enron's collapse and guarantee the Manx subcontractors that they would get paid. How could they do that? And yet the Treasury stood by and watched EPH Crow go bust and local contractors lose money. And the answer was, we used a cleverer type of modern contracting, which I imported from America. And I went to the Millennium Room and I presented to the MHKs, and everybody there said the government should use this type of contracting going forward. And did they learn their lesson? No, that's why they lost the €5 million at Ronaldsway, because they didn't learn their lesson.
Do you think they didn't know how to handle yourself? You came in from the private sector, you had a different way of doing things. You think that actually this was a completely different way of dealing with things, and they didn't know how to handle it?
Well, I got things done. I worked for the board of the MEA. My boss was the board of the MEA, personified by the chairman. And he told me to get this thing built, and I got it built. And the forensic audit, PKF, said it was a job well done. All the money was well spent. There was nothing untoward, no impropriety at all. That report, which cost a couple of £100,000, has never seen the light of day.
And were there any checks and balances? Were your fellow board members able to say to Mike, are we okay about this? Were they able to challenge you if they thought you got it wrong?
Oh gosh, they're very strong board. They challenged me all the time.
So it's not Mike Proffitt bulldozing through a project?
Good grief, no, I think you need to interview John McCallion. He's a very strong man, 40 years at Shell, and believe me, he's 12 years older than when I started with him now, and he's had some ill health. But he's a very strong man. Nobody bulldozes over him. And then you can go through them one at a time. Dr. John Taylor, nobody's going to bulldoze him. Charles Farger, he himself is a chartered accountant. He's used to numbers and contracts and figures. You couldn't bulldoze him. You know, Terry Mackay, very successful businessman. And then, of course, Trevor Ferrer, who was running power stations in Hong Kong and China and knows the ins and outs of how a power station works and how much things cost. No way could that board be bullied in any way.
So what do we end up with? A electrical infrastructure power station that was definitely needed, and it's still way ahead of its
what you end up with is a power supply system which has got triple mode redundancy on the fuel side, has got the cleanest technology available in the world on the emissions side, and has got the best efficiencies. So you have got a world-class electricity supply and delivery system for the next probably 35 years with major overhauls of the turbines.
Did we pay too much for it?
No, absolutely not.
Could it have been done any cheaper?
Yes.
It could?
Yes. It could have been done about £1.5 million, maybe two cheaper. We could have had a nasty brown brick building standing there among the community instead of a pretty good-looking glass fascia.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. it won the prize Best Power Station of the Year in 2003. Very few people know that. It wasn't advertised on the Isle of Man much. We found out in 2003, and we didn't market it much because it was business as usual for us. And, we didn't want to blow our own horn, as it were, but it is admired around the world.
Now, we've got all that new kit. You're insistent there was no wrongdoing at all by the board. What would you say to the electricity consumers who are having to see higher bills to pay for all this?
Well, first of all, they don't need to see higher bills to pay for all of this. That's just propaganda. This can be financed over 34, 35 years in the way that we meant to. The 120 million that the government took on did not need to be taken on. It could have been added to the 180, and it would have been financed.
Added on to the bond, the Mike Proffitt bond.
Yeah. That way you smoothen the costs out over the 34 years of the bond. You don't have these terrible impositions and burdens of cash flow in the first 5, 6, 7 years. That's spread over the life of the bond. Now, in the last 15 years of the 30, in the second half, the infrastructure will be developing so much cash that you then catch up and can put it aside to pay the bond off. But what we're doing is we're foolishly dealing with the current cost of 120 million instead of spreading that over 34 years, which is our intention. Now, apart from the financing of the power station, which would not have led to higher electricity prices, the increase in prices is quite simply because of the increase in the price of oil and gas. I mean, when we did this power station, summer gas was at 11 cents, and winter gas was at sort of 28 to 30 cents. When we did the power station, oil was at 14 to 20 dollars a barrel, depending on season. And now you're looking at 70, 80, and last year we saw 120, even higher. I mean, it is propaganda and nothing but for the government to tell, or for the MEA to tell the consumer that these price increases are because of the cost of the power station. That's absolute rubbish, and it should be admonished as such.